We all see life through a very narrow, highly programmed lens. And we are programmed to think that our tiny little vision somehow encompasses the whole. And that is so far from the truth. It is informed by the whole, but the information is so processed down so that we can somehow manage to live lives. We cannot handle the totality as egocentric beings. It is not possible. For most people, the journey through life is the creation of a story, the story of their life. And as we have talked about before, some are good stories and some are not such good stories. Some of us think we're telling the story. Some of us are witnessing the story. But one way or another, we are part of a story. We so love story. We so love the drama. The good against evil, evil against good, love story, love conquering all. So many stories that we embrace that we can't quite get enough of them. And those of you who are now streaming 500 stories a week on TV, you know that they never end. They're just more and more stories, and yours is one of them. How yours turns out is yet to be known. I will tell you, as a writer, the ending is everything. My friend Jerry Zucker, who directed the movie Ghost, said, movies have two halves, everything up to the ending and the ending. That means 50% of your life will be determined by the last grace notes. Up until that moment, anything can happen, but those last moments are redemptive. Those last moments are the moments that define the whole. Up to that moment, you can live and squander your life in any way you want. But if you arrive at a particular clarity, awareness, poetic note, something happens at the end, and it turns it into something exquisitely beautiful, or not. We look at the world around us as a story. And right now the story is looking grim. But if you open your eyes a little bit, you will start to see historically that the story of the human experience is in many ways repetitions of very grim occurrences. That really make it hard to envision moving forward in life. Some people's stories are really surrounded by darkness. Some people's stories are elevated, lifted up beyond the darkness that others feel. Because we see it through our own little lens, we don't tend to have empathy for people living in darkness if you're in light, or if you're in light living in In darkness, if you have this other vision, it's hard to encompass the people who have a different vision. So people who are suffering are kind of out there as another story. People who are living the great life are up there as another story. Our own life is our personal journey. And we're dominated by it, and we're dominated by the forces that come in to talk about it. In this point in time, there's enormous media input into the world that we live. And so we are surrounded by what feels like a global awareness, but in truth, it's still cherry-picked by our little brains. And we make it whatever we want it to be. It's easy to look at the times we're in through a lens of, this is the worst of times. But my parents were born just before the Great Depression, and they did something miraculous, I think. In the middle of World War II, not at the end of it when the baby boomers were suddenly born out of the euphoria of success, in the middle of conflict, in the middle of this worst drama on the planet, up to that moment, my parents gave birth to me. I probably would have told them, from my general perspective, that's not a good idea. The world could be coming to an end. Things are horrible. If the Germans win, we as a group, we were Jews, would probably be annihilated. They didn't hear any of that. They heard this biological imperative and something else, I don't know what it was, that said, we want to bring life into this darkness. And they did. And I am, of course, forever grateful that they had the courage, or whatever it was, the biology, to just make a baby at that moment in time. You never know how the story goes. Never. And you can't have a story without life. Bringing life into the world is the beginning of stories. It is the beginning of a journey into something remarkable that tends to have outcome. And we are trained somehow to look for happy endings. That's a reinforced part of our existence. Triumph over adversity. Love wins out. Saves the day. And sometimes it does. But not always. We had a friend over for lunch the other day whose mother is a Holocaust scholar. And she described to me an image from the Ukraine where this village, this massive group of people in this village or town rounded up all the Jews and took off all their clothes and put them in a pit and machine gunned everybody to death. And the takeaway was how much these naked, vulnerable people hugged their children and hugged each other and found love and grace in the last, worst possible moment of a life. And for me, that story is beautiful. Partly it's beautiful because I truly believe, through my own experience, that this end moment that so many people think is blackout is a doorway. And you can enter this doorway open-hearted, open-eyed, ready for something greater, or you can just back into it. Or go like this. Or, oh no, 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 please not that. But this doorway is into something that nobody can really offer you a pure explanation of. It is the unknown unknown. But for those who have witnessed the oceanic truth of being within themselves, there's a strong hint and indication that that doorway leads to the thing and the space and the reality that has always been. The story of your life ends not with how you greet it, but with what awaits you. And you will not know that until the door opens. But in the story of human life, walking through that door saying thank you, walking through that door trusting, walking through that door open to the unknown, the uncertainty of being, happens only as a result of how you've lived your life. You do not go forward into the unknown if you've lived a life of fear and hesitation and anger and drama and me, because then it will just be seen as a thief pulling you from yourself. But if you have learned to live a life of generosity and kindness and empathy and care for other people, if you have taught yourself to surrender your own personal being to something beyond, if you have taken these small baby steps into the world of goodness, that ultimate doorway is a moment where you will embrace those around you, and you will embrace the unknown, and you will embrace the future, and know in your heart of hearts that what you are embracing is what has always been. Presence. We're all on this ride, and I'm at a very strange crux in the ride, but it's a really valuable one for a teacher to be in, because for reasons unknown, I committed myself to a life of seeking what you might call answers, or the truth, or the higher understanding of what this all is. And I have somehow or another had, I think, what would be perceived of as a wonderful life. From a literary perspective, if this was a story being told, I think most people would enjoy the read. There's been a lot of drama, conflict, resolution, success, risk-taking, possibility, all within a very benign world setting. If anything, the world of the 1900s, past World War II on, was perhaps the most peaceful time, at least for the American continent, or the American society, that the world's ever known. And we were raised in that, and the story that took place in that is a beautiful story. And what I'm trying to get at is, I have loved every dramatic part of my life, every sweet part of it. I have loved the loves of my life. I have been driven by deep forces that I have paid attention to. And I think the great lesson of my life has been pay attention. Listen to yourself. Myself informed me on so many levels. I think I've told you this story, but as 5 years old, I was sitting in a sandbox, and the whole of my head opened up, and I realized that my entirety of being was the universe. That my head was the rest of the universe. It was the middle of the daytime, and it was like brilliant darkness. And there were like wheels like Ezekiel saw, like galaxies spinning through the space. And then I was back in the sandbox. And I went, okay. Nothing you're looking at is what it appears to be. That was a big, big piece of information. The footnotes, the little notes here are, my friend Barry Kaplan was a good friend of Tim Leary's. He offered me some LSD. I took the LSD. It was a overdose of LSD because the man providing LSD to Tim Leary had just arrived at my house with a bottle like this big. And the LSD I had been carrying in my pocket for 6 months didn't work, so I got an eyedropper full of pure lysergic acid from Sandoz Laboratories in Sweden and Switzerland. And I went on a journey that changed everything, and I came back, and I didn't know why I came back. And I said, why am I back? And they said, to tell the world what you saw. A road was provided for me to do that, but with huge chasms that had to be jumped over in some way through huge risk in order to fulfill what I was told to do. In other words, it was not bridges and paved roads, it was rocky soil and rocky paths. But in that ride, I kept finding instruction. And I kept finding I had a dialogue with the universe. One of the things that happened in that dialogue was that I said to God, please bring me a woman who I can live with, who will share my life. This is just before I got back from America, from India, where I had been looking for spiritual guidance and teaching. I think you have all heard this story. The day I met Rudy, who was my teacher for my life, that evening my friend said, do you want to meet a girl? I said, yes, George and Cheryl Subkoff. And Blanche walked in the door, and she walked in the door, and I said, really? Is this who it's going to be? And we talked, and we went back to her loft, and I walked in her loft, and in front of me were these paintings on the wall that she had done. These really strikingly powerful, feminine, I am a person, real person paintings that really knocked me on my ass in a certain way, and I just said, I just met this person. I met her through her art. And I just was knocked out by it. And as I've said before, this was an arranged marriage. I told Blanche that night everything about how I talked to God, and God said he would bring me someone, and brought me Blanche, and she thought I was totally crazy. And yet she said yes to the beginning of a relationship that 2 years later became a marriage. And the paintings on that wall were exquisite. And over the years, one of them hung over our fireplace in our home in Northridge. Another was in the closet with a group of other paintings. Yesterday, here's how life works. Yesterday we had a gallery opening celebrating Blanche's art and my art together in a group. It was a show called An Artful Marriage, and it was how our life was defined by art. I have no idea how you get a gallery show, and I have no idea how you find a gallery that wants to do a show about you and your wife when you've never ever shown your work. And I've only done the kind of photographs that I do for 2 years, and Blanche has been doing painting and pottery for decades. But to show the road of life, about 30 some years ago, I rewrote a movie called Sleeping with the Enemy. The director of that movie, Joe Rubin, not a relation, but he looks like me, had a daughter who became a gallery owner in San Francisco, looking for a show to put on in this beautiful gallery. And he said, well, you should see the work that my friends do. She saw it. She's the one who came together with this idea of a artful marriage. She took us in. We developed with this show. Anne Cameron, who works with us, got to the middle of it, and she really, really made this thing happen, got all the prints made. And last night we had the opening at the gallery called The Laundry in San Francisco, and many of you were there. And this is the 50th year of our marriage. It's in June 21st. This story that I'm telling you will have been going on 52 years, because that's when we met. Rudy, who I met the same day, I believe, as Blanche, has been, as you can tell, a part of this journey. And this is all heading to what looks like a moment of pure happy ending. An artful marriage, celebrated 50 years, beautiful artwork that I can't even tell you how it arrived. It just did. There is in the narrative world completion, coda, done. Unfortunately, our lives are not over. I have zero idea what comes now. If that was the ending, what do we do for the rest of the ride? And this is where I think the talk is wanting to go, because finally, what's happening is not so much really a celebration of anything. People have long lives sometimes, people have good marriages, people have wonderful things happen. Blanche and I have been very lucky in that regard. But I don't care who you are. In the end, it is all extracted. It's all taken away. One way or another, everything you have built and reached for and manifested and created just turns into nothing. I don't want to tell you that to diminish the power of what it was like last night to be in a space with people you love, seeing your work and seeing 50 years of artistic integration. Two lives held together in many ways by creative juice. But that's not the end of life. In the end of life, there's no party. Exactly. I mean, you can have a party, but basically, the doorway that you're about to go through is your own. The celebration is not how much you've gotten, but how much you've let go of. Rudy said you can't let go of what you haven't had, so go out and get it and have it. Have this big, huge, wonderful life. Have a gallery opening, have a premiere for your whatever, your play or your movie or your child's birth or whatever the joys are. Have all of that stuff. But know the real spiritual journey is having and letting go. The letting go is the art of it. The getting it, the having it is wonderful, it's dynamic, and it's programmed into the system. You have to have a whole life in order to be willing to say thank you and let go. Whatever that whole life may mean for you. If you live a life hidden, afraid of life, in a closet, in a small apartment, in a life that go to work and do the same thing every day and nothing satisfies, and you watch television until you go to sleep, and if you have a life that does not nurture and does not expand you and does not enrich you as a person, letting go of that life may be really hard. You may feel cheated, you may feel deprived, you may feel angry at all of that stuff, and that you don't want that, because in a way, the people I know who have regrets in life are not letting go of the thing they haven't had. They are more possessed by the thing they haven't had than those who have had and are able to say, thank you. One way or another, you have to be able to say thank you and let go. I've had a number of farewell lunches with people recently in which they've all described to me this sense of having not accomplished. Every one of them had good lives, had accomplished all sorts of things, but they had in their mind the one thing they haven't done, selling a movie script usually, let alone having it made, having the critics hate it, or winning an Oscar or whatever. They haven't had that thing, and they really think that their life would have been complete with it, and they may leave the world thinking they didn't do what they were here to do. Meanwhile, they've had good lives and marriages and children and kindness and good friends and all sorts of things that are really wonderful. That is a life. And having a life that has story elements that are like good stories doesn't happen all the time. What happens to most lives is good moments, really good, sweet moments. Sitting on the porch, with a glass of wine or a Diet Coke, or, sitting back, just reading the newspaper, just enjoying looking at each other for a moment. Whatever these moments are, trust me, this is the core of a good life. You can let go of a good life. Fill your life moment to moment with acts of kindness and grace. Allow yourself to listen to your deepest inner self. Find a way to serve the world and help people, to be part of life. Do all of that. And then when you come to this point in the road where they start to extract you from the world, which the world will do, the real lesson is grace in that moment. I'm watching all my friends get older. I'm watching all of us deal with physical loss, familial loss, parents going, friends going, all of these things happening. And you can experience all of that with a certain kind of biological fear. And I have to say, biological fear is natural. But emotional fear, story narrative fear, that's something you have inculcated in your life with your own years and years of building an idea of self. That is the essence of spiritual practice. Let that stuff go. The thing I am seeing more than anything right now in the process of letting go is what wants to hold on. And the way you see what wants to hold on is with an enormous sense of emotional sadness or grief or anger or attachment, but you cannot free yourself of worldly attachment until it's exposed, until you see it. You do not hide from it. Do not run from your sadness. Do not run from your grief. Do not hold on to your triumph. Do not have anything. All of it will suddenly reveal itself to you. And I sit and think about my home in Los Angeles, which I love to pieces. And all of how it's going away. And there's a part of me that's trying to hold on to all of the elements of it and realizing you can't hold it. You can't hold it. You can take 5,000 pictures, but you can't hold it. And what's being shown is the holding part of the psyche. And there's a part of me that wants to pretend it away or meditate it away. And then the lesson I keep getting is live it, feel it, be it. You are that. Don't pretend not to be it. The vision of your sadness, the vision of your grief, the experience of loss is real. And if you can be in that space, you will watch it expose you to yourself, and ultimately it will lift out of you, because that's what it does, and you become more and more liberated. Freer and freer. But you can't free yourself of the shadows, and you can't free yourself of the unexposed and the unknown. It needs to come to light, you need to see it, and you need to then go, or as my wonderful mother-in-law said in her last wordless moment, there really is that which we arrive at. The what can you do? It's called surrender. And it was at the very core of Rudy's practice. Let go, surrender. If you want something to do in your material life that is a practice, that is a meditative spiritual practice, it comes down to let it go. Surrender. And you can't surrender what you don't see. You can't surrender what you don't feel. And so the fact that the universe brings these into sight and into feeling is a gift. Don't be angry at your grief. Don't be angry at your sadness. Don't be angry at loss. Don't be angry at any of these things. They are there because they are part of your shadow life. They're part of your psyche. They must be witnessed. They must be seen. And you will have to experience all of that. And then out of that experience comes what they call letting go and transcendence. Transcending the self. Transcending the ego's desire to hold on to the ineffable reality of life. It cannot be held, it can only be experienced. And that's what we're doing. So this period that we're going through right now, for me, has moments of trying to create endings or codas. And last night, this gallery opening was a brilliant, wonderful celebration. But I'll tell you what it also was. It was a moment. It was a moment of being with people who you love. That is the core of the human experience, not celebration of the event, of the people, or of the things that are hanging on the wall, or the pots that are on all of the tables. It's a celebration of being with human beings who love you and who you love. That's doable anywhere. And if there's anything left in the world as we move forward, is the possibility of being with people you love and sharing the time you have, sharing your limited vision with other people's limited visions, and letting that expand your vision into something greater. And have this life that is meant to be lived and ultimately meant to be surrendered. And the best part of it is not your triumphs. I mean, it's so interesting. You know, I had a lot of movies open. I went to a lot of premieres. The experience of a premiere lasts about 2 hours, and mostly you just want to go home. It doesn't give it to you. Winning an Oscar, which was a great moment, is over like that. It doesn't give it to you. It's just another moment. All of these celebrations are moments. What's the best part? The people you celebrate with. The joy of being with other, and then ultimately, the joy of being with yourself. I'll leave you with one last thing. My journey is the journey now of being with the self. I've always been a collective person. I've always been someone who loves community. I love being around people. but I am deeply aware that none of you are coming with me. Not in the collective sense. And some part of you is woven into the fabric, but in the end, that door is yours. So I do see the years ahead, whatever they may be, as essential to entering into the being that one is and immersing themselves in the totality of oneself, being the vastness of totality and the singularity of you, all mixed up into one thing. This is the work of the last years of your life, and when you get there, don't be afraid of it. It's calling you. Be willing to spend time alone, be willing to go for walks, be willing to sit still, be willing to just look at the sky, be willing to have a sense of the beauty of life, and knowing that even going into the worst of the worst moments, and that Holocaust image that is haunting me, hug the people next to you, knowing that we are defined by the love that we express even in the most difficult moments. I want to thank everybody again for coming last night, and those of you who were unable to make it, the show is on for 2 months until the end of June, right past our 50th anniversary. We may go back there one more time and give a talk. They've asked us to do that. I don't want to burden you all with having to come back, but if we do it, I'll at least let you know that we're doing that. And there is a certain closing that's happening. We're leaving here, we're leaving Los Angeles, something new is opening, but the loss is something we feel dramatically, and we just think it's important that you know how much we love you, and how sad, how deeply sad we are about this leaving. But ultimately, we all leave, and it's the great practice. So thank you. Any comments, concerns, interests?
Not quite sure how to put this. As we were driving here today, I was thinking about it's almost like a ritual of coming over here on Sundays. And it's not over yet. So I don't know that, I don't really want to process it until it's over. And yet, once it's over, then it just won't be happening. And it just...
Well, it will. We have to talk about this. It will be happening. If all
We're
goes
not
well,
going
it won't
to
be
this
here. No, we won't be coming.
house, and we're not
right.
going to the Whole Foods, and
Right.
we're not,
Right,
you know,
right.
it's just not, even
I-
though something else will happen for you, for us, you know, this won't happen.
Right. That's, I mean, one of the great gifts of life is the realization that everything you love is going away. That everything that is familiar and comforting and supportive and all of that goes away. You know, Rudy died without telling us he was going to die, although he kind of did. He said to people, he gathered everybody together for some reason that nobody understood, and then he died. You know, a plane crash. It was the beginning of my life, not the end. My spiritual life started when Rudy died. He had taught me, he laid the ground rules for how to work, and I took them seriously. And for the last however many, almost 50 years, that's what I've done. And I'm grateful for that. And I would say to all of you, this is an opportunity to learn how to walk through that door by yourself, how to take this on, because we all have to do it. But to share it with community for as long as you can is really important, because it reinforces the capacity. You will all find yourselves more completely capable, you know. There's a lot you have to share with other people. I mean, there will be classes, we'll talk about it, but there will be classes, I hope, in Oakland and in Petaluma. In fact, next week's class will be in Petaluma. We're all going to go to Susan's home for class, because I want to establish that as a space. To the degree that you're open, I don't know, we'll see how it all plays out, but the possibility of classes in Oakland, and in Petaluma and Oakland. And if you all say you don't want to do it, then you're on your own, as we all are, you know. But if this can be sustained, that will be wonderful. I hope to come back here, as I was saying, probably mostly in the winter, but I would come back and have classes in both places and have an opportunity to, to reinforce the way I have in New York. I've gone back to New York 3 times a year to keep a promise that I made to the people in New York that I will keep coming back and teach. And I have done that, and that's effortful on a lot of levels, and I'm getting a lot older, so I can try to make that promise. I would like to do it, but what I really want is for you guys to be able to sustain your effort with each other or on your own. But the cool calculating reality of it is that you're on your own. And we always are, and always have been, and in a way that sounds scary until you realize what you are, and who you are, and what this is. And your aloneness is cosmic. There's only one, which is sometimes lonely. And sometimes I think manifests this out of loneliness. Even though it's creating a kind of cosmic drama. It's like all your fingers having personalities, and you're, oh, wow, we're having such a great time. This is really wonderful. It's one hand doing it, or 2. My feet in, and we bring in a whole society of beings, and we completely allow ourselves to forget that we are one voice with many sounds, and we all come into play together. We need to learn how to remember who we are, and we need to play well. And many people forget that. So, like I say, we're in a very interesting moment in history right now, and I look at my parents who saw madness coming across the ocean, and from Europe, and how frightening that was, and how it mobilized America to have to actually go to war. Now a lot of the madness that we're seeing is coming from everywhere, our country, everywhere, and it's like a global something going on. We have to figure out how to work with that ourselves individually. How do we deal with the world as it's now emerging? And I'll talk about that more, even though I think more people will turn this off, because who wants to hear that stuff? On the other hand, this is a very crucial time, and the only prescription that I have for it, which is the prescription my parents knew. They made love and had a baby in the middle of it, and make love and be love. Be love and be kind to each other in the moment of crisis, because that's all there is. And that definition of you as a kind and loving being at a moment of terrible crisis is more powerful to the universe than you can possibly imagine. It is the ending of life that we as collective beings root for. People finally giving each other the best of who they are. I don't know why that's so important to the universe, but I know it is. I know that as a writer, that's all I look for in my writing. It can come across as Hollywood ending fake, or it can come across as, wow, they became truly human. That to me is like the most beautiful thing in the world, is people becoming truly human. And that seems to be why we're here, I think. I don't, as I've said so many times, I used to have all the answers. And I do not have any. But I can tell you the simple things that you've heard from day one: truth, beauty, love, kindness, compassion, win. And if you don't have them in your life, you don't want to leave this world being that person. It's not a good way to leave. You don't want to not be a person who took from people and never gave, who hurt people and never loved. It's just not good. But anyway, look, this is a period of transition and upheaval for all of us. In a way, we'll talk about it as best we can. I just hope it doesn't become more than anybody wants to listen to. But I do think the underlying universal of all of this is that whatever is happening right now in our lives, shared lives, is part of the inevitable, transformative reality of the human journey. And it involves loss as well as gain. And we're all on it, and we're all going to find our way through it. And in the end, it all works out. Okay? Thank you.